Hey, everybody. Welcome, welcome, welcome. So, I'm here with filmmaker, documentarian, comedian Peter Coffin, and we are having a chat here because in just an hour, the great documentary about the CPI Summit Against Hypocrisy is about to air. How do you feel, Peter?
I'm feeling pretty good about it. I'm excited. I was a little bummed getting up this morning because it's kind of moving from one project to the next or finishing up a project is often like, I'm going to need something to replace all of this work that I've done, but I'm excited to see people's response to it. I think it's going to be it's an entertaining documentary. I think that it's not just, any one thing. It's mostly a serious, like, what did we do? Why do we do it? Here's how much work goes into it, etc. But there's a few pretty funny moments, I think, in it too.
Yeah, it gives you a real behind the scenes look at our great event we just did, the Summit Against Hypocrisy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very excited about it. And it'll be at 1 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That's in 58 minutes. It will drop. So the link is down below for the premiere on the official CPI channel. It's going to be pretty awesome. Yeah. So, I'm sitting here. I'm looking at the world and looking at the crazy events that are taking place, and thinking about how we've got Kamala Harris one breath away from the presidency, and we've got the danger of a new world war hanging over our heads. And these are wild times, absolutely wild times. But we've got important work to do, and it's good to have a group of people who understand how serious things are and are ready to get things done. And at least it's nice weather today. I woke up, and it's finally getting warm here in New York. It took it long enough, but how are things over by where you are, Peter?
Well, it was raining last night, but it was pleasant because it makes sleeping easier for me. But it's very nice today. I had forgotten to take my allergy pills until about 5 minutes before the stream, so I am waiting on those to lighten things up a bit for me. But it's real nice down here in Florida. It's very pretty. It's warm, maybe a little more warm than I want it to be today. I've got my AC on and all that. But very nice day. Excited. A lot of cool things to show people. Like, people don't see the side of it that I think we're going to present here with this documentary. I think they see the presentations, the videos, more serious aspects of it, and the sort of end product too. Whereas I'm excited for people to see that it's people. It's people that make this stuff happen. It's people that show up to places and people that I'm excited.
Yeah. Well, here's the link. It's down below to the link to the premiere, and then here's also the link as well. So it's on the CPI YouTube channel, the Center for Political Innovation YouTube channel. So you can go subscribe to it. And yeah, you get to see the human side. I mean, some of the people that are in it are already here. Noah, you remember Noah, he's in it, right?
Noah's in it. Noah actually, I think, has a pretty cool story in it. I enjoy Noah's input a lot.
Yeah, Noah's in it. So one of the stars from our all-star cast is already in the chat. If anyone else is in the chat, give us a shout out, right? We'll put you on the screen if you're somebody who's in the film, or if you're just somebody who's really excited to watch it. But it's gonna be great. Jyoti Brar, the leader of the Communist Party of Great Britain, Marxist-Leninist. Jeddah, also known as Lumpia Logic, she's in it. Tyler McConnell, Simon Miller, Elizabeth Young, the president of the Center for Political Innovation, is in it. Oh, we're not people, we are Russian bots, says Noah. Right. I mean, it shows there are real people, right? There are real people that are involved in this kind of work. Funky Lollipop, big fan of our work. She was at the February 19th event that we did after Rage Against the War Machine. She said, "I know it's going to Rick. Thanks, Peter." Very good. Very good.
And probably Jenny, rock. I have to imagine it means rock.
Yeah, and Jenny Lynn is totally stoked. She is totally stoked. And Jose Gonzalez, who's in Venezuela, he says howdy. He's given us a howdy. So there we go. There we go. And Nina is ready. Left less. Nina is totally ready. She's totally ready. Shout out to you, Nina. Yeah, we're doing good stuff here. So I'm also I'm understanding that you have another documentary you're working on about
Yeah.
modification of Marxism. Do you want to tell us about that project?
Yeah, that's the next thing I'm coming up on. It's I making a documentary kind of about how Marxism, communism, and all of this is being transformed from dialectical materialism to idealism. Is kind of the core of what it is, so that you can have a Marxist fandom, a Marxist community, and when I say community, I more mean consumer market, etc. And it's unfortunate because it's not, it's obviously intended to be like kind of the antithesis of those things. It's a method to find truth and what is objectively real in the world, as well as enact class struggle, as opposed to, sit around on the internet all day and talk about how smart you are compared to the Republicans, I guess. you know and there's some of that. We talk about that some in this documentary as well, not necessarily to a technical extent, but Tim Williamson, who's in the documentary, kind of brings up a couple of good points on that.
He does. Tim, also known as Timoshenko on this YouTube channel. He is in the documentary. He makes some very, very good points. He's a Missouri resident who's really awesome. Yeah, I mean, there's just so many great people in this documentary. I don't want to forget people and not name them, but it's just, Gavin Lockhart, big member of our community. He's in the documentary. Sam Bismuth, shout out to Sam. He's in the documentary. Oh, here's Timoshenko is here, by the way. Get
Nice.
ready to watch. Tim is in the film, so there we go. Yeah, I mean, it's gonna be a really, really awesome film. I think people are really gonna like it. I went on the radio show with Dr. Wilmer Leon and Garland Nixon yesterday.
Awesome.
I told them they're both in the film. They did not know they were in the film. They'll be watching. They're very excited. So that'll be.
That
good.
was kind of the coolest thing to me. Like, the whole film starts off with you on a radio show with Dr. Wilmer Leon.
Mhm.
I think that's all. Like, that was kind of just a really natural thing. I just arrived and I got in at about midnight because my flights were an effing nightmare that day.
Sure.
And I just died onto the bed. Woke up in the morning, came down, saw that you were on a radio interview, and I just went right back up, grabbed my camera, and came down and started filming. And I mean, it functions as a really good setup for the whole thing. It was one of those things where it's like, oh, this is the start of the documentary right here. And just immediately started filming. Well, after going up and down the stairs, which was.
And that's gold, though. I mean, that's what documentary filmmakers like, right? They, the natural stuff it's not staged, it's not planned, it just kind of happens, right? That's what, when you're making a documentary film, you want like little things like that just happen, right? Like that's the goal.
Yeah, so, I didn't know you were going to be on Dr. Leon's show, for instance. Like, I was just kind of rolling out of my bedtime haze. I hadn't had any coffee yet. But it was like, this is perfect exposition. This explains what we're doing here perfectly. I mean, that kind of thing is it's fantastic, and there's a ton of that here. And again, I mean, just to repeat what I said a moment ago, there's a lot of moments that go into creating something like the Summit Against Hypocrisy that nobody really sees. They see a conference room full of people looking at somebody talking, or the opening ceremony, which are really good things to see. Like, all of the speeches were filled with a lot of great stuff. The flag ceremony at the beginning was super powerful. They always are. But there's a human element. Like, you and I were talking about this. I think it was maybe October or November when we even came up with the idea. Hey, what if we did like a documentary? I sort of pitched it as, a reality show type idea, like just taking that sort of Office format, and what if we just filmed people and just had like a actual human view of what goes into one of these conferences, and who has to put in physical labor, who people have to travel from around the world. They have to sort of descend on one area. And even in sorting through all of the footage, I sent out, because we didn't do interviews on site, and that was an oversight on my part.
Mhm.
But I sent out a questionnaire to everybody after the summit, and got people to send in footage to me. And I got a lot of stories about what people had to go through to get there, to the point where it was almost too much. Like, I didn't really include a lot of that in the documentary, because if I went into the amount of detail I'd want to go into on any one of the stories, then it would overshadow everything else. Because like everybody really kind of stepped up to come there, to go there. Like a lot of people sacrificed time with their families, money, flew out, because it's an important thing. It's important to do something that you believe in a world that's not necessarily in the place that you want it to be. Like, these things matter, not just to you and me, but to everybody who puts some degree of effort into something like this. And I want people to see that. That was kind of what was behind my thinking when I think, I don't remember if I was on the phone with you or I texted you, but like one day I just sort of was like, what if we did this?
Yeah. Absolutely. And, it really kind of shows you that it's just a lot of fun to put on a conference like this. You get to hang out with people who, have a similar worldview with you. You get to practice, you get to kind of experience things together. You get to joke and laugh. And I mean, I wish people could see that. I wish people could understand the value of being part of a community, because for a lot of people, this is just kind of fandom. It's just kind of being on social media, watching people, and that's you're missing out on the real beauty of being part of an organization, if that's all it ever is. If it's all just something you kind of quietly observe, this kind of passive entertainment, you're missing out on the real beauty of being part of a community. And I think that comes across in this film very, very well. And I hope that people watch it and want to get involved. That's my hope. So
there's also like a couple of different versions of community. Like there is a community in, not necessarily a literal sense, but the sense of the word around like things like BreadTube and things like they have quote unquote communities. But like I said earlier, when I was talking about the documentary I'm also working on called Marks for Sale, these communities are more or less really just consumer markets for people to, spend their time kind of interacting with people who end up being kind of like, to be frank, like the similar worldview aspect of it isn't completely genuine, because any small bits of dissent, they start canceling each other in these little communities. They turn into competitive things pretty quickly. Who's the biggest fan? Although it's not biggest fan, it's biggest Marxist or biggest communist or biggest socialist or biggest anarchist or whatever. And the kind of community that we have in CPI is one where, there is some ideological disagreement. It's not like completely homogenous, and that's accepted. And there's, discussions that have happened between people. Like, we all have the same, I would say, general worldview, but I would say that in terms of people that I've met through CPI, there is a lot more willingness to, be open to different things, and the kind of community that has been cultivated around CPI. Again, I don't think that we all deviate too heavily from each other or anything, but there's dissent that is allowed. Yeah. There's discussions that are allowed. There's debate. There's, some argument that's allowed, and doesn't make everybody hate each other and try to cancel each other and all that kind of a thing. And that's something that I just really appreciate. It's something you don't see in these like BreadTube type communities. And that's another thing. I mean, it's not necessarily that you join CPI to have a community. It's that there is one. It's just there. Like, we're an organization. We're serious about doing work and serious about, agitating, organizing, etc., educating in particular. But, there's a much more sort of real, like, you're allowed to be a human being around other human beings type community. You're not really looking out for if you're the best version to present to this highly specific Thought Slime Discord or whatever.
Right. Right. No, I mean, it really, it comes across in the film that we have people from many different backgrounds, many different walks of life, many different corners of the country who one way or another have been drawn to the message and the work that CPI is doing, the function, of putting on events and conferences. And they come together, and we had this event, and we did it, and it was a smashing successful event. Scott Ritter was there, Garland Nixon was there, Dr. Wilmer Leon was there, Nick Brana from the People's Party, and many of our members got up and gave great presentations, and it was great. And that comes across in the film, and you get kind of a sense of where people are at, how they got drawn to our message. Kind of quirky takes that people have, and you see members of our group putting in their own words kind of the perspective, which I think is a really valuable thing in the film. You throw in some humor because that's your department, Peter. As a comedian.
I try.
Yeah.
I sort of came in fist swinging a little bit with the humor there when I was introduced in the film. So
yeah. No, and we got Tyler, and
Tyler's funny too.
He is too. Yeah, he knows how to do
good
that.
Timing.
Yes.
Probably the best timing in the film is a couple of the things that he says, like about when he's talking about what the Summit for Democracy is. Mm-hmm. I enjoy, we all kind of go through our little, it's hypocritical, it's a dog and pony show, and we all say that. And he just says a big pile of crap in the funniest possible way.
Yeah,
I enjoyed it.
No, it's great. It's really, really great. And I'm pretty pumped about it. I'm going to keep dropping the link in the chat because I want people to be watching as it premieres, because it's going to be a really great moment. I think what I'm going to do, I don't often do this, but I think I'm going to actually watch the premiere on my television, because I have the Roku where you can watch YouTube on your TV. I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch it on my television.
It looks better on the television. I've watched it on every platform I can, on the phone, on the computer, and on the TV, just to see if it, looks good in all of those. And it does. And I think the place it looks best is on a TV, which surprise, surprise, the thing made specifically for video, it looks best on. But
yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I think I'm going to watch it on the television. I'm going to get the Roku out and go to the YouTube thing. And I would encourage people to do that. Watch it on your TV. That might be a great
You can still chat using your phone too. In fact, it's actually, I like watching streams and premieres on the TV and participating in chat on the phone, just because it's much more comfortable than sitting in an office.
I forget that exists, right? Every so often I'll remember, the TV is kind of my wife's domain. She likes to watch TV and I just like to be on my computer. But every so often I'll remember that I can watch TV or I can watch YouTube on my computer or on my TV. And then people will tell me about, they'll send me a picture of oh, I'm eating breakfast right now, and here you are. And I'll see an image of myself doing a live stream as they're eating their oatmeal. And I'm like, damn, there you go. Joe Paradise says, made it in time, watching
Excellent.
On TV too, like always. Absolutely. And I'll keep dropping
Excellent.
The link in the chat. The link is down below. We're about 40 minutes out. So it's gonna be something. I hope that people watch it and enjoy it. It's certainly an all-star cast. Certainly a lot of political points made about Joe Biden's Democracy Summit, about many different things. And also, I saw that Lumpia Logic, her daughter, gifted her your book, Woke Ouroboros.
Oh, I did not see that.
Yeah, she tweeted out that her daughter surprised her by giving her a copy of your great work critiquing the woke mindset. So that's kind of neat. She tweeted that out. She showed a picture of that as a Mother's Day gift. So there you go.
I've been off Twitter for the last day or so, maybe a couple of days.
Good for you.
I had a bunch of people come. I mean, I'm not completely off it. I retweet little funny things and say little funny things, but I pissed a bunch of people off the other day. So I was just like, nah, I'm not going to pay attention to this.
Well, I need to figure out TikTok because there's a guy named Zachary Brunch. He goes by Zachary Brunch, and he's been taking clips from us, from CPI material, and putting it on YouTube, on TikTok, and it's been doing very, very well.
Your
And
speech in particular did very well on TikTok.
yeah, and that, I mean, TikTok is less rigged, it looks like, than most of the social media, which explains why the U.S. government's trying to ban it, because it's less rigged, it appears. And so, we need to figure out TikTok. I'm going to have to get back to figuring out the TikTok. I also, the shorts tend to do pretty well on YouTube, the YouTube shorts, which I think are like a response to TikTok, right?
Yeah.
I think that's kind of, it's like YouTube is trying to pick up the TikTok energy. So they have YouTube shorts that they pump in the algorithms some.
Yeah, I actually make those, and I've put a lot of small clips from very important documentaries up as shorts, and some of them can do pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't had any of them go do the kind of traffic that we've seen content from, the CPI channel doing on TikTok, but they are definitely and I think part of it is they're counting on TikTok getting banned. I think they kind of want that to happen so that they're the alternative. Hey, YouTube's got shorts now too, and it's like, I don't know. That whole thing is ridiculous. If we're gonna dip our toe into that pool for a minute, it's absolutely ridiculous that we can claim to have free speech at the same time as having actual legislators attempting to ban a social media platform because it's owned by another country. Like, if you look into the sort of management of TikTok in the United States, it's pretty autonomous from China. Yeah. Actually, I've looked into it, and they don't really. I mean, they've said it in Congress as they're presenting their case against these laws that people are trying. And also, these laws go well beyond TikTok. If you want to start talking about like Patriot Act style messed up crap, like start reading beyond just the TikTok ban. The law itself it's much more far reaching and much more has consequences far beyond that of ban. Yes, far beyond that of banning a single social media platform. But even so, even if it was just banning a single social media platform, it's disgusting, honestly. Yeah. If you're looking at what and this is why I tend to make arguments against rights. Just Marx did, lots of people did in the Marxist tradition. It's just a permission from the bourgeois state. It's not some sacred thing that you just have inherently as a human. It's words on paper, and if it's words on paper that holds the country together, like free speech is, like that's an ideal that's intended to sort of make people think of themselves as something that has a reason to exist. If you're going to just kind of crap on it and treat it like just words on a paper, because that's ultimately really what you have the power to do if you want. It's terrible. It's like, you shouldn't ban TikTok. You shouldn't ban anything. Like, it should all be there. I'm sorry it's doing so well in the United States,
Yeah. No, the law is called the Restrict Act, and people should look into the details. It is broad, sweeping legislation that, I mean, the government can take your property, can violate your right to privacy, your right to due process. It lists certain countries, and if they claim that anything you have is somehow linked to them, you're done. I mean, it's a shocking piece of legislation that many people have voiced concerns about. Tulsi Gabbard and Rand Paul in the Republican sphere. I know even AOC and Bernie Sanders and others have said they're not comfortable with it. A lot of people have looked at the Restrict Act and been like, this is an insane piece of legislation. And I keep seeing all these videos on like conservative YouTube channels that are supporting it on the grounds of like, oh, TikTok is crazy and left wing and cringe. And it's like, okay, this is not just like, first of all, even if TikTok, you don't like it as an app, if you don't like, the libs of TikTok or whatever, that's not a grounds for banning it. People have the right to be crazy, don't they? People have the right to be stupid and silly. I mean, they have a right to do that, number one. And number two, like, the law is about so much more than just one social media platform. It is this broad, sweeping piece of legislation that just completely nullifies cyber freedom. I mean, right to privacy, due process. I mean, it's a scary piece of legislation if there ever was such a thing. So There you go.
Due process specifically, I think.
Yeah.
I've seen arguments about like, well, some of the things that they would be enabling themselves to do in this act, you would be able to prove that you don't have, an affiliation with blah, blah, blah in due process. And it's like, well, I don't know if, again, to liken it to the Patriot Act, a lot of people were not given due process during the Patriot Act era. And, it's not unreasonable to think that the same thing would happen with this. And again, like you said, a lot of people just support it based on the idea that they're afraid of China and TikTok. And I was listening to a podcast on the implications of this a couple of days ago, and the guy that was talking about it was talking about how he was afraid that China could use AI and deepfake a bunch of threats to like U.S. legislators and military members' families, and just send it out via TikTok. And I was like, I don't think you know who's using TikTok. If you think that that's like, you know what I mean? Like,
it's very odd.
It's a very, like, they're really reaching on their arguments on this kind of stuff. And they're not discussing the actual ramifications of the law itself. A lot of people are either unintentionally very distracted by the fact that they're afraid of TikTok in China, or very intentionally using TikTok to misdirect people away from all of the right stomping that is done in that law.
Yeah, well, Nina Jankowicz, who ran that disinformation governance board that temporarily existed before it was shut down by the Biden administration, when she was coming out and defending what they did, she said a lot of things. They always fall back on that. They're like, no, well, we want to make sure that if there's a hurricane, that Iran and China and Russia can't like send out false information about where to get rescued or something. And it's like, I don't think that's what it's about,
Yeah.
And it's like, and if you look at the amount of money that the U.S. State Department, they have a whole, many, we're talking hundreds of millions of dollars they spend to combat, disinformation and misinformation from certain countries. And it's like, do you really think this whole budget is being spent on like making sure no one tweets out the location of power plants or something? It's like, you look at it, this is very clearly done for partisan political activity. This is done to isolate certain news outlets, it's like, it's really clear what they're doing. And I think that the reason that Department of Homeland Security Disinformation Governance Board got shut down is because Republicans got the memo that whatever it was going to be directed at them. And I think in light of January 6th and all of that, then the Republicans somehow they determined that this was going to be an entity that was going to be used to try to cleanse their people off social media more. And so then the Republican parties kind of rallied against it, and then they backed down. But long before that board existed, I mean, they have these huge budgets, they have these huge budgets for whole departments of the the State Department that just are involved in web countering disinformation operations. If you look at that, I mean, it's pretty clear that's what creates the atmosphere on social media that enables certain people to be silenced and canceled and stuff like that. I mean, that's pretty clear what's going on there. I mean, if you see it, and the amount of money that they're spending is massive. Now, you do have to wonder how much of that is just corruption, right? How much of that is, they talk about it like a New York City construction project with, it's like $500 hammers that they buy. And,
Absolutely. And I'm sure there's a fair amount of it that is. Like, if you could slip a little bit of money away and profit off of also getting your way, why wouldn't you?
Well, and that's what's wild is like one thing people talk about in the United States now is they talk about deep state overlap, where it's like, in Russia, they have one security agency, the Federal Security Bureau, the FSB, right? But here in the United States, we have the FBI, we have the CIA, we have the Department of Homeland Security, we have the U.S. Naval Intelligence, U.S. Army Intelligence, U.S. Coast Guard Intelligence, U.S. Air Force Intelligence, You know, the NYPD has an office in every single U.S. state. Did you know that? The New York City Police Department of just New York City, they have an office in Tel Aviv. They have an office in a number of African countries. You know,
they're technically a bigger military than some small countries, if I remember right.
Right. And then you have the Secret Service that guards the president, right? And that's actually technically a wing of the U.S. Department of Treasury, which makes no sense whatsoever. But, you know, and the more you dig into it, it's like we have a million different agencies, right? And they're all competing for budgets. They all want funding and they have different agendas. And then on top of that, all of these different agencies, they all don't do their own work themselves. Neoliberalism, they all privately they contract private companies to do their work for them. And you know, like the State Department, it's not like in the State Department that these people are being hired to do their counter disinformation stuff. No, they're hiring a tech firm, right, that sets up a troll farm, you know. So if you do the math here, I mean, it's like to some degree or other, they don't know what they're doing.
No.
and they're trying to, you know, all direct it in one way. And then even among the government, it's very clear that there are many different agendas among the rich and powerful. And so you can see the United States just kind of coming apart. I mean, and this is an aspect of the time we're living in, is that U.S. society, I mean, it may be the center of the global economy or whatever, but it's being pulled in hundreds of different directions with hundreds of different agendas as the economy crashes and burns, and as, you know, Eurasia and the rising alternative on the global markets gets stronger. It's really kind of interesting to watch. I mean, we do have the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. And I've covered, you know, with RT that scandal like crazy. I mean, the fact that they came out and said that the Hunter Biden laptop thing was a Russian propaganda thing, that it wasn't true. And the actual sitting director of the National Intelligence said, well, no, we don't have any evidence of that about the Hunter Biden laptop. And the former intelligence officials, Mike Morrell, and Antony Blinken, were blatantly doing so as a partisan effort to help the Biden campaign. I mean, it was wild what happened. And I mean, we had the intelligence community blatantly meddling in a U.S. election, not you know, trying to get Americans to hate Russia or China, trying to help one candidate win over another candidate. I mean, that was wild. I mean, and it shows you how insane things are getting. I mean, that this government apparatus that the U.S. has created, it is being pulled in different directions. It's being used to manipulate and maneuver our politics in so many different ways. Shocking stuff.
And I mean, if you go back to the whole original Russiagate scandal, where everybody was complaining about the idea that Russia could be, you know, influencing people to, I don't know, view their advertisements, also view like that. The thing that bothered me the most about that was that Facebook was the problem. Russia wasn't the problem. If you care about, you know, a massive entity of wealth and its own specific interests influencing your elections, then your problem is Facebook. It's not any one individual thing that wants to do that. It's not, you know, a billionaire or a company or a state. It's none of those things. It's Facebook, the thing where all of that goes through. And if you have the possibility for other countries, corporations, billionaires, etc., to influence people, I mean, what is social media if not literally entirely an influence machine?
Yes.
Like the question that they brought up is, do we want Russia influencing our elections? And then to some extent, they, you know, went way beyond that with much crazier theories. But, you know, if you want Microsoft influencing your elections, if you want, you know, name X tech company or X finance capital company, BlackRock, whatever, if you want people with money and the ability to push content to influence your elections, what's really the problem with Russia beyond that? Like, and I'm not even saying that to defend Russia. I'm saying that because I don't want any of these entities, you know, being able to spend large amounts of money to give people information without context and try to sway what they think and try to change what the world around them looks like. I don't like that, you know, but the problem is Facebook. It's not any one of those individual entities.
Yeah, the fact that right before the 2020 election, a news story about all kinds of scandals associated with the son of the major candidate,
Mm-hmm.
it came out in U.S. media outlets. New York Post was the main outlet that broke it, and then Facebook and Twitter just said, you know what, we're going to ban this story, and you couldn't share it on Twitter and Facebook. You couldn't share it. And their reason was, well, we heard from the FBI that it might be a Russian propaganda thing. And now we learn
We
that it
heard,
wasn't, that it was 100% true. Everything
yeah,
about that laptop was true. And
it's
so,
even been acknowledged in mainstream media at this point that
yeah,
a lot of it is true.
and that there was nothing to base the claim that it was Russian propaganda on. And that was
Well, they heard it
basis.
from the FBI. Would the FBI lie?
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean it's bizarre. It's really really bizarre. And I mean at that point we have blatant interventions. Not that this kind of thing hasn't happened before to some degree or other, but it's always kind of happened before, like in the name of the U.S. establishment overall. You know what I'm saying? It's
Mhm.
always been there are many examples of the FBI kind of meddling in U.S. politics, but they were doing it for like all the Democrats and all the Republicans against the communists or against
Mhm.
the anti-imperialists. You read the history of the FBI, some of the things they did were really wild. I understand when there was who was the first black heavyweight champion of the world?
I couldn't tell you. I don't know
I forget
anything
what his
about
name was,
boxing.
but yeah, it was a boxer. He was the first black heavyweight champion of the world. One of the FBI's early operations was to try and bribe him to lose because they were
Mm.
convinced that black people would see him win the fight and then rise up and revolt.
I mean, when people and here's the thing that you have to think about as soon as you say something like that.
Yeah.
When somebody says like X, Y, and Z influencer might say something that is, in benefit of X entity, whether it be state or capital, a defense they often use is, that's stupid. Why would they even bother doing that? And it's like, do you not realize to what extent, like if you have on record that they would go and attempt to bribe a boxer to lose,
Jock Johnson,
so that black people would not think that they could possibly win at life. I mean, that's such a small little thing compared to the entirety of the black population in the United States. It's something that probably not even a majority of black people in the United States were paying attention to. Like
Right.
they will go to an extreme extent to influence people. And that argument is it's totally invalid to say you can't expect them to want to say this little thing that maybe a few people will hear. They absolutely do. They've provably done that for decades and decades and decades when the technology to do that was significantly less advanced. Why wouldn't they be doing it now?
Yeah. And you read about that. There's some weird stuff in the history of the FBI. The other thing about the FBI that I find amusing is that like J. Edgar Hoover was very clearly like he was just this kind of like socially awkward, probably on the spectrum, guy who lived with his mom, who was a congressional librarian. But he was like an expert on communism, and he started giving these speeches about how dangerous and scary the communists were. And so they gave him his own wing of the U.S. Department of Justice, the FBI. It was originally called the BOI, Bureau of Investigation. They gave it to him as kind of a reward for all of his hard work exposing the Reds or whatever. And then he did stuff that was like very blatantly partisan. Like they had comic books, FBI comic books that they distributed where he was the hero, like fighting the bank robbers. Like, did you know this? Like, it was really ridiculous.
No.
Yeah,
I've never looked into that entirely, but I've heard some really bizarre things about it. But
right, and some of it was just him trying to like build himself up to be a celebrity, kind of. They had radio programs paid for by the FBI.
That's more along the lines of what I've read about, like their campaign to kind of make him a somewhat of a household name, which is just also very strange.
Yeah, his slogan was, what is it? The FBI is as close to you as your telephone.
Thanks. I really wanted that, FBI.
Yeah. Right. Well, we got a couple super chats here. Let's give people their, Ren Sten says, we spent much time blaming Russia instead of focusing on election security. But if anyone illiberal questions, they're conspiracy theorists. Mm-hmm. What do you think of that?
I think that's not false, I wanted to tack this on to the FBI thing real quick. There's a line in a song by Street Sweeper Social Club by the rapper is Boots Riley, the guy who made Sorry to Bother You. Mm-hmm. And he says, and the line is, phone sex is now group sex. There's feds on your telephone.
Oh boy.
And I just thought, I heard that one day and I was like, that is the goofiest way of saying that, but that is 100% true.
There you go.
But yeah, I mean, they were even promoting, like the fact they were promoting themselves. The FBI is as close as your telephone. I'm sorry, I'm still cracking up about it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do agree with that super chat though. I think like the second you question something in a matter that doesn't line up with one of the two sides that can take advantage of your question, then you're like a lunatic. You're just some crazy fringe weirdo spouting things that can't possibly be real.
Mm-hmm. And we've got Reestablishment says they want us to think factions with infinite money don't have infinite resources.
It's not even. It's yes, Reestablishment has been a viewer of mine for a very long time, and I want to agree with that. And I also want to take it a step further. Money doesn't even matter to them. It's not. It's like they're affiliated with where money comes from. You know.
Yeah.
It's not even that they have infinite money. It's that they have beyond infinite money. They print the money. They create the money. They have control over what money is. You know, it's a level above even having infinite money. It's the fact that the BRICS countries are talking about using China's currency is got to be terrifying the people who are in on that little scam. I shouldn't say little, maybe really, really big scam.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I think you're absolutely right about that. And that's why, you know, dollar hegemony is out the door. And many people have pointed out that it's like the sanctions stuff is backfiring. In the 90s, they could just totally destroy a country. I mean, Cuba, North Korea, and Iraq, all three of those countries in the 90s, they were really devastated. I mean, you know, the USA put sanctions on them. No one could do business with them. North Korea, they couldn't import any oil, and they needed oil to run their food system, and they had a food crisis because of that. Cuba, I mean, people went to Cuba in the early 90s, and they talked about how the lights would go off. I mean, they only had electricity for so many hours a day because of the sanctions. In Iraq, it was a similar situation. But that was the 90s. The Soviet Union was gone. The alternative Commie-Con or whatever economy was gone. You could only do business with the United States, basically. They had absolute hegemony. And if they wanted to just go after a country, you were done. But that, you know, that started to change. You know, 1999 was a really pivotal year. That was the year that Putin took office in Russia. That was the year that Hugo Chavez was elected in Venezuela. That was a lot of things happened in 1999. We'd had a decade of neoliberalism after the fall of the Soviet Union, and things started to shift. In 1999, I went to Quito, Ecuador when I was a kid, and I was like 12 years old, and I saw a country full of desperately poor, starving people. Caused by a man-made famine by neoliberalism, and things were starting to shift already. And then, you know, as things started to change, you had the U.S. invasion of Iraq, and now with China and Russia and the Belt and Road and the Bolivarian countries of Latin America and Iran, and the axis of resistance in the Middle East. I mean, things have really taken a dramatic shift. The USA just doesn't have that power anymore. And in fact, leading to countries just saying, okay, well, if the USA is going to play this game, we can't trade with anyone who the USA doesn't like. Well, we'll just start joining this other economy of countries the USA has cut out. And the USA is starting to lose out, and the dollar is losing its value. And at the end of the day, all of our money is going to be worth a lot less as a result of this. And the United States is going to lose out. It's like they're still playing like it's the 90s where they can just destroy countries, and they don't have that ability anymore. They don't. And you know, and sometimes you have to wonder, like I have to ask ordinary people, like, you know, you have to wonder, like, do you not see how stupid this is? Like Venezuela and Iran are two countries the USA doesn't like. They don't like Venezuela. They don't like Iran. Right. And so, you know, the USA, like Iran will send a ship to Venezuela. And the USA will be like, they can't do that. Like,
yeah.
Who said? Like,
Under what like standard can they not do that?
Right. And it's like, I want to say to people, like, do you see how stupid this is? It's like this is two countries that the USA has like said you can't do business with. You're kicked out of our international system. No bank transfers, nothing. And so they say, okay, we're going to send a ship. And they're like, well, they can't do that. That's not allowed. It's like, who says? You know, I mean, it's like, you know, you quit the game and then you're mad about how they play it. You quit. You don't have a right to say anything.
Exactly. It's like, you know, it's the result of playing this contradictory little game they've played for a long time. Ultimately, the system of finance capitalism is established to create monopoly, to create dominance, to create singularity. But at the same time, they're preaching everywhere democracy, free markets. I don't really associate free markets with democracy, but the idea that they're promoting when they promote free markets is that everybody should have a chance. And, you know, you're saying this stuff, the obvious, you know, end result of free markets has been where we are. But that's not what they're promoting. They're promoting everybody has a chance. Everybody can do things, while they just literally step on people all over the world. And it's like, do you not understand why this didn't work? Like, this was like you telling people that you're doing the opposite of what you're doing right before you're doing it, like in their face. Of course that's going to not work eventually. People have to eat, people have to live, people have to exist. Countries have to figure out ways to at least satisfy the people of their country enough that the country doesn't collapse. It's I don't know. It's ridiculous that the United States government of the 1990s just thought, and you know, there was a lot to tell them that it was the end of history and that nothing was like, this was the situation that was going to be going forward. That's what everybody in the media, all these, you know, very smart thinkers were telling everybody. And you know, there's the people who buy the ideology and the people who just want to use the ideology to justify their dominance. But either way, they both are just thinking, you know, I'm going to rule forever. That's how this is going to work. And I can do whatever I want, and I just screw whoever I want. And you can't, as it turns out.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, where were you in 1999? What were you up to?
I was playing the Sega Dreamcast,
okay,
which came out on September 9th of 1999. I bought that with Sonic the Hedgehog and Jet Set Radio. I remember I was not doing things. I was 10 and then 9 minus 4. So I was 15. So I had a job as a school janitor for a year at that point. And I was rolling in dough because I was a kid that didn't have bills. So I would buy things like that, which is stupid because my family didn't really have money. So like to you sort of, you get a job. Like I started working very early. I started working at 14 because I was tired of not having things. You know what I mean? And that was kind of, you know, a temporary fix for not having things, because you eventually realize, oh wait, you know, having like what I think is a lot of money now in my I've worked for a year brain turns out to be nothing. It's the fact that I bought a video game console after several months of toiling away. Yeah.
Well, I remember in 1999 there was the Battle of Seattle. Did you hear about the Battle of Seattle? That was
yes.
I remember I was a kid. I was 12, you know, I was like vaguely tuned in, but I just remember seeing like Newsweek magazine had about this anarchist riot that had happened in Seattle against the World Trade Organization. I didn't know what the World Trade Organization was or why these people were against it. But I just remember seeing that they like had spray painted like windows and they were breaking windows or something. And I remember it said that you know, anarchists protest against capitalism. And it was like the you know, the what do you call it? The caption with the picture. And I remember thinking like, okay, are these people are anarchists? That means they're against the government. and they're protesting against capitalism. So does that make them communists? Like, I was perplexed. I remember like studying that picture and being like, what's going on here at this Battle of Seattle, and what is the World Trade Organization, and why are people mad about it? And I remember just looking at it and being like, what's going on here? That was one thing. The other thing I remember about 1999, that was the year Bill Clinton bombed Serbia. In the name of, they claimed that there was a genocide going on in Serbia. Now they admit that wasn't happening. There was not ethnic cleansing happening, but they claimed that, that Albanians were being persecuted by the Serbian government. And so Bill Clinton bombed Serbia and, killed a whole bunch of people. That was an awful thing that was going on. That was also the year that the USA was very heavily meddling in Chinese politics with the Falun Gong.
Yeah.
The internet was like a new invention, and the USA was using the internet to help the Falun Gong, destabilize China, block intersections, riot in the streets and stuff like that. And it was a pivotal year, the year of 1999. And I think that was, we'd had neoliberalism for a decade. It had been 10 years. Like 1989 is the year that the communist governments in the Eastern Bloc started falling. 1999, we had a year of that. We'd had a year of just Western capitalism triumphant, the Soviet Union falling. Latin America was just economically devastated. I mean, South America was just Mexico and NAFTA and all this, and Eastern Europe was suffering. And 1999 was kind of the turning point. That's when, things started to move in the other direction. It was the very beginning. And then the response was then, a couple of years later, you had 9/11, and you had Bush was just neoconservatism triumphant, the invasion of Iraq. And then Bush's invasion of Iraq had consequences they did not predict. One of which was shot the oil prices up, which actually helped all the, Hugo Chavez and Vladimir Putin.
Absolutely.
Astronomically. The other thing that happened was that in Iran had been drifting kind of into the U.S. direction because they didn't like Saddam Hussein. They didn't like Iraq. But in Iran, it's the state-run oil industry. That's the basis of like the government sector in Iran. That's where all the hardliners who are really anti-capitalist and anti-imperialist are. And then Bush named Iran in the Axis of Evil speech, which was really stupid. He didn't have to do that. He said that there's 3 countries we're going after. He said Iraq, North Korea, and Iran. So Iran was moving to like support the United States because they didn't like Iraq. And then Bush said, oh, you're in the Axis of Evil. And then the oil prices shot up and gave the hardliners in the Iranian government way more money. And so Iran, moved into an anti-imperialist direction. And then, a couple of years later, that Hezbollah in Lebanon, right? That's the Iran-backed, anti-Israel group. Israel invaded Lebanon, and Hezbollah just destroyed Israel, just kicked Israel's ass, like, amazingly. And because of that, all of a sudden, this Iran-backed militia group is like the hero of the Middle Eastern world. The oil prices are through the roof, so Iran is making loads of money. Putin's and Russia's like back in business all of a sudden, right? After the 90s. And then in Venezuela, Hugo Chavez is using that oil money to spread socialism and all over the continent. And Bush is sitting there going, oh, shit, what did I do? It's like they thought the USA invading Iraq would just be like, we get rid of another anti-imperialist country. No, it actually resulted in like a catastrophe. And Obama comes in trying to pick up the pieces almost, like trying to make friends with Europe again. And then ultimately Obama, drops the oil prices. That was, it's really wild to think about. I wasn't tuned in when this was happening. I was a kid. In the 90s, we all thought, I don't know if you remember this. You were older than I was. You're slightly older than I am. So I had no idea that Russia was starving, that like 10% of the population.
I didn't know. I knew none of that. The extent of my knowledge on it, when I learned about what changed in elementary school, about what was different, was just names. It was just, it's not the Soviet Union now, you have to say Russia. And I was like, well, it's USSR though. And they're like, no, it's not.
I thought they were just watching fireworks for the whole decade.
Yeah. No, we liberated everybody. Yeah, exactly. Everything's great now. It's over. The nightmare's over.
Yeah, that's like we saw that picture of like people celebrating when the Soviet Union fell, and that was all that happened in Russia for a decade. And it's like, no, there was big problems happening there, and we didn't know anything about it. We were just not informed.
I honestly knew very little about any of that stuff going on until 9/11 really was when the flashpoint for me understanding that there was a world outside of the United States that wasn't great,
Yeah. Mhm.
I was, again, I didn't have a lot of money. I didn't come from a particularly educated area. Like our idea of living in the lap of luxury was having the Sega Dreamcast, you know,
Yeah,
or
yeah.
like it was a very different time in terms of what you could learn too.
Mhm.
There wasn't really a way to get around. Like there were people like Alex Jones out there who were saying anti-establishment things, and in some cases being correct about them, in some cases not.
Yeah.
It wasn't really until there was a viable way of getting around that, and they're trying to control that now, like to
Mhm.
loop it back around to the TikTok crap. Like it's that's where we are. Like they gave us a way that we can have some idea as to what's going on in the world, and then they realized that that's what we were using it for.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was wild, and I remember during those years, even though the internet was still was like had started, right? The internet was
Yeah.
still kind of like a sexy new fancy thing. It wasn't something that everyone had access to. And I also remember, like, if you could get your hands on anything that was dissident, it was like a piece of gold. You know what I mean?
Oh
Like,
yeah.
you know, I mean, it was like, wow. I mean, I remember like years, you know, 4 or 5 years after that, you know, like, you know, I'd talk to somebody who went to a protest somewhere and they'd give me like one communist newspaper. And I'd be like, whoa, look at the, you know, it was like, yeah, you know, I mean, it was to hear anyone say anything that wasn't standard, wasn't mainstream, was
Hmm.
very hard to get your hands on. It was like very valuable. And that's why, you know, you had people like, now we have the hipster thing and all that, but people would like go and move to Greenwich Village in New York City, or move to, the various like radical neighborhoods, because that was the only place you could find like dissident kind of stuff. You know,
Yeah.
it was hard to find dissident ideas in the United
Absolutely.
States.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was
We are
wild.
coming up on the documentary here pretty
We
soon.
are, folks. We are. Here is the link. I'm dropping the link in the chat one more time. Go and click that link down below. Go and watch. We are about 2 minutes out. We're two
Yeah,
minutes out.
it's just
So
I mean, we got to talking about a lot of very interesting stuff, but like all of that stuff is kind of the substrate for what CPI is. Like
mhm.
all of that is very everything we talked about during this hour is very important to that. And again, just to quickly restate this documentary is kind of about showing you what goes into CPI, why it happens. It's people, it's our people, it's the people who are, you know, giving their time and their effort towards something. And I'm really excited for everybody to see it. It's very different than anything I've ever made. I'm really, really excited for everybody's input and reaction.
All right, folks, go watch it. Talk to you soon. Bye bye.
Bye bye.